Selfit, Accounting for Sexual Dimorphism in Personalized Motor Skill Learning, where the author basically have updated an existing system to train adults' psychomotor skills by considering the differences between men and women.
Hello everyone, my name is Marian Neagu. I'm a PhD student at Min Paritech Research Center in France and the Polytechnica University of Bucharest. And today, on behalf of my colleagues, I will present you the Accounting for Sexual Dimorphism in Personalized Motor Skills Learning for an existing learning environment. So my proposal for you for the following minutes is to change a bit the context to speak about sports. The context for the Selfit system speaks about the more and more interest in health for public sector and also individuals. It is reported in the past year that 8.3% of deaths in non-disabled adults were attributed to inadequate levels of physical activity, from lack of physical activity to poor level of physical activity. So our goal with the system that we are building is to create a smart learning environment for improving the general health of people using training session, mainly physical activity. And the current paper we introduced today is considering the sexual dimorphism component. And I will start with the definition. What sexual dimorphism means is the presence of differences between males and females, and not only in humans. This is also applying for animals too. And the context for our system is the personalized motor skills learning. And I'm going to the roots of the problem on the Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's defined the three learning dimension, which is the cognitive, is the psychomotor, and also the affective dimension. So if our focus is in the psychomotor domain, and it is defined as the lifelong process of learning how to move accordingly to a dynamic environment. And in order to train psychomotor skills, there are two main categories to train. It is the fundamental movements and the specialized movements. The fundamental ones are required in order to learn the specialized one. We can define as categories of specialized movement, the daily life activities that we do, the professional, the sports activities that we do, or leisure activities. But in order to be able to perform this specialized movement, you need to be able to perform the fundamental. And the fundamental movement are defined as the push, pull, core, knee, and hip dominant exercises. So you have to be able to master a certain level for this fundamental movement in order to jump to the specialized one. And now I'll do a small introduction to the Selfit system. As it can be seen here in the picture, what we have, we use the standard intelligent tutoring system components, the user interface, the tutoring, the trainee, and the domain. The user interacts only with the user interface. The tutoring is fed by the training module and the domain module. The tutoring part feeds with data the user interface, and this is how the whole things are interacting. In order to generate a specific training session, what we do is actually estimate the current training potential for the user. So we assess a certain questionnaire at that day with the duration, how much time do we have to train, fatigue level, motivation to train, sleep quality, and also we assess all the past training history of the trainee, and we follow a certain pattern in order to train the user. And going to the sexual dimorphism part, the differences which were actually stated by Mori 4 years ago are in several categories. We have differences in body size between male and females, in our case for humans, which interest us, in shape, also in traits, and in parasystic load between male and females. On our certain use case for the Selfit, we use based on these big categories, specific subcategories which were of interest for us, and these are the morphological, the physiological, cognitive, and brain differences. Also, the menstrual cycle for the woman was interested in order to propose a good load, a good training load at a certain point. And also there are female specific risk of injury. So we needed with this update for the Selfit system to consider also the risk of injuries and the differences between men and female. For the menstrual cycle, for example, what it can be seen on this table here is that a woman passes in every month through these 6 phases, from early follicular, mid follicular, late follicular, and so on. And based on the sports theory and the sexual dimorphism component, the training load based on each of these periods should be adapted accordingly to that period. Each period is not fixed between different females, but they range between 4 and 6 days. So it depends for each woman in particular how this will evolve, but not more than 28 days per cycle. And we need to adapt the load of a training based on this. So our first initial version was not considering this, and we saw that the impact may be very high. And I'll show you that we did some simulations on this part. So going further, the existing architecture of our system was containing the periodization on the tutoring, general profile, gathering data for the student, the domain module with the specific entities. The domain was represented using an ontology. It was implemented in Protégé. We have the core of the ontology is the movement skills, and then plenty of classes which were raised on top of the movement skill class, like psychomotor profile, the movement patterns, training program, and so on. The trainee or the student module has information about the user itself, and the tutoring part aims to find the optimal sequence of activities to maximize the average competence of overall the targeted skills. And what you see in blue here are the components which were added to the existing system in order to consider the sexual dimorphism for each of them. And I'll take them one by one. For the domain module, what was interesting from the sexual dimorphism point of view is how to adapt the session content, meaning the exercises, the levels, the loads, based on the position on the menstrual cycle. So we needed to actually add this dimension in the domain module, and how to update the session content, the session meaning the sets, meaning the session itself, the microcycle, mesocycle, and macrocycle parts based on the student risks, and considering that the female has more risks associated to certain categories of muscles and movements. In the bottom of the screen, you can see the ontology that is now represented in Web OVL. For the Selfit student model, what interests us is to actually understand better the female-specific risk while training and incorporate that in the student module. Mitigation risk tasks, which are interested to be taken in consideration. Because if we go under or below imposed threshold, we may have a certain risk that it may go to different issues and surgeries and medical problems. And also integrate the evolution of women's menstrual cycle, understand better this component and integrate it in the student mode. For the tutoring part, in the initial version of the system, we consider a novice trainer approach, which actually use some session templates in order to generate sessions, and it tries for inside the session to fill in with the best exercise for that template in particular. So we just say, okay, you have to train this movement type or this body area, and will have to pick the right exercise for that person based on his history, shape of the day, and so on. A task is composed with an exercise, specific exercise, the level, the number of repetitions to execute, and the number of sets. And the feedback that we get from the user after he executes each of the exercises, each of these tasks, is we get back a number of repetitions in reserve, which is known as the number of repetitions you could have done until failure. And this is a subjective value. the rate of perceived effort, and the fatigue perception. So on the tutoring part, what we did is actually we implemented this calendar differentiation between men and women, because in the first version of the system, based on the sports theory, and also as almost all the trainers do, use the same pattern for training independently between men and women, and this may actually get into specific issues. I'm just showing you a system overview of the Selfit architecture. So we have in the core the contextual multi-arm bandits approach in order to generate the right tasks. And the training planification is done in years, then in months, then in weeks, then in days. And inside the day, we planned a certain session with the warm-up, content part, and also the cool-down part. And we map most of the sports theory inside the system with the links between exercises, movements, and the rules for generating sessions. And now, if we go to the results part, what we did is actually we have played a bit with how we could be able to assess the risk injury part, and for that we used the OpenCV library, and we recorded some girls, both girls and men, while performing an exercise which is the most conclusive for the risk assessment for ACL injury risk factor. And this exercise is the push-up, and as it can be here, the back squat, the back squat. And as you can be seen here, we plotted the main points, and we did several analyses in order to see what are the angles which are good or bad, and the movement itself. And we played a bit. We did the dashboarding on the exercises. We put also some weights on the user for the man, and we plotted several stuff in order to see and to assess better what are the risks associated to the certain movement, such as the velocity, as it can be seen here. We measured a lot of degrees. The velocities for the ascent and descent on the movement, the ankle, the knee, and so on.
A couple of minutes. Sorry, Laura, just a couple of minutes.
Yes, I'm on the results section. So yeah, thank you for the heads up. And also, what we did was to actually this first part was related for the results was related to the risk assessment, and the second part is related now to the calendar, to the menstrual calendar. And as it can be seen here, what you see on the table, in the first part we have the days of the month from 1 to 28, and based on a standard training plan for a person who just starts the training. For a man and for a woman, if we use the same pattern for women as the one for men, the difference is when the values are not equal, so we define light, medium, and heavy, will show an suboptimal or a risky session. And we can see that actually starting day 6, there are already starting to be differences between men and women. So if you train a woman like a man, will face issues. And we also plotted here some graphs for, we did a training for 240 days, 3 sessions per week, and we show a lot of differences which go either to suboptimal training or to risky factors for the training. So the risk of injury for 24 days was minus 49. And yeah, it can be seen that per days there are specific differences. As a conclusion, we demonstrated the fact that sexual dimorphism is important to be taken in consideration when designing a system for sports training, and also the trainers need to take this into account. What we presented through this paper is the updates that were done for the Selfit system in order to incorporate the sexual dimorphism part, and we played a bit with the ACL risk of injuries, and the training calendar for the woman. The dashboarding for the ACL was done in a separate application, is not yet fully integrated in Selfit, but the menstrual calendar is already integrated into the Selfit system. I added also some sprints with the system right now, which is accessible on the Selfit app website, and it can be downloaded on the phone. As future work, we want to monitor the morphological and the physiological parameters as well, and see what those get us into. We want to test with real users this part with the differences between men and female, and create a data set based on that, and see what the results would be. And also we want to integrate the ACL risk assessment module inside the Selfit system. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you, I mean, I have to say I'm not particularly familiar with these kind of systems because I'm not an athlete. So what
you are our user then.
Okay, great. I will do your test, your trial. So I was curious to know to what extent this sexual dimorphism is taken into account into commercial products, because I know, I mean, have you looked into the commercial product to understand whether and to what extent they take this consideration into account, these aspects? And then I was curious about, children. Because at the beginning of your paper, you mentioned the fact that there are, differences in body composition even before puberty. So I was just curious to know whether you think this kind of differences can have an impact also in training children. So if your model is somehow to be expanded also to be applied in children age.
Yes, thank you for the questions, Francesca. So for the first one, the application that I tested commercially and with the team that we work on this system, we didn't found to integrate the sexual dimorphism component, and this is an important fact. And also the personalization is not really personalization for most of the systems, and this. As I said, maybe you train for a long time, and you may get to some injuries, or you lose your motivation because it's too easy. Not making and not considering these differences will easily go into either different injuries, or it may go to lack of motivation in the long run. And for the second question, with the guys that we work here in the research center, one of them is also a sport trainer, and he trains kids starting age 8. And he already used the personalized men and female adaptations for his training. So I would say, yes, it's important starting from child ages to focus on this sexual dimorphism component.